Gentleness before the storm. The sun dipped below the endless Texas sky, casting a warm orange hue over the quiet, manicured streets of Willow Creek, a small, seemingly unremarkable town in central Texas. Neighbors waved across white picket fences, lawns were neatly trimmed, and American flags fluttered from porches. Everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. At the heart of this neighborhood stood the Harris residence, an old, two-story brick house, spotless on the outside, like every other home on the block. Inside, however, life was far from picture perfect. Emily Harris moved gently through the kitchen as the evening shadows grew long, the sounds of clinking pots and the scent of buttered cornbread filling the air. Everything about Emily radiated gentleness. The way she tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, the softness in her voice, the care she put into preparing every meal. Emily's world was shaped by routine and the subtle anxieties that clung to every moment. She had married David Harris a decade ago, fresh out of college and full of hope. David, now a burly man in his late 30s, worked as a supervisor at the local lumber mill. To outsiders, he was the epitome of dependability, a devoted husband, a hardworking father. But behind closed doors, he was quick-tempered, controlling, his words harsh and expectations rigid. Even more daunting was Martha Harris, David's mother, who had moved in after her husband passed away. Martha was a pillar of the church community, outwardly gracious and respected by all, but at home, her demeanor chilled the air. She scrutinized everything Emily did, from the way laundry was folded to the seasoning in the soup. Her criticisms were sharp, often delivered in whispers that stung more than any shout. Dinner was a performance, repeated nightly. Emily plated roast chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans, placing each dish in its proper spot. She checked twice to ensure Martha's tea was steeped just right and that David's fork was on the left, not the right. Their daughter, Lily, a bright-eyed 7-year-old, picked at her food quietly, sensing the tension she could never understand. Small mistakes were always noticed. A shirt wrinkled, a cup misplaced. David's voice would grow low and icy. "How many times have I asked you?" Martha's eyes would narrow, sometimes muttering, "A woman's duty is to her family. How will you ever learn?" Each word, each look, chipped away at Emily's confidence. But she responded the same way every time, with quiet apologies, lowered eyes, and a forced smile. Emily kept her bruises hidden, both the physical ones and those inside her heart. She became an expert at masking sorrow with tidiness, sorrow with silence. The neighbors saw only her gentle morning waves, her soft laughter at block parties, her willingness to help with church events. No one suspected anything was amiss. But beneath Emily's gentleness was a simmering storm, a faint but growing awareness that something was deeply wrong. As the chapter closes, she gazes out the kitchen window at the peaceful street, wondering how much longer she can keep her world from crumbling, wondering if anyone would ever hear her if she finally cried out. The uncracked mask. Every morning in Willow Creek began much the same. The sun stretching sleepy beams of light through crisp curtains into the Harris home. Emily slipped out of bed before dawn, careful not to disturb David's heavy sleep. She checked her reflection in the hallway mirror, skillfully blending concealer beneath her eyes and over the faintest shadows of bruises. The ritual wasn't about vanity. It was about survival. The mask she wore was not just makeup. It was practiced poise, measured words, and a gentle smile that never wavered, not even when her hands trembled. To neighbors, Emily was the image of composure and grace.
Can't afford to make a
They'd
mistake
see
on
her
this one.
tending rose bushes out front,
Pressure is too high.
offering fresh lemonade during sweltering afternoons, never once letting on that each cheerful greeting cost her a sliver of strength. Mrs. Becker from 2 doors down praised Emily's parenting at church, remarking how sweet little Lily always looked so well-behaved and well-dressed. No one noticed how Emily winced when Lily hugged her too tightly, or how she subtly adjusted her sleeves downward, covering the bruises on her wrist. Routine became a blanket Emily pulled tighter each day, dressing Lily in pressed skirts, packing perfect lunches, arriving precisely on time for school drop-off. The smallest deviation, she knew, could raise questions at home. She was careful, obsessively so. If a sleeve slipped or she moved too quickly, David's questions would needle her later, and Martha's sharp eyes missed nothing, her scathing whispers echoing in Emily's mind even after the older woman left the room. But there were moments Emily let her guard down, just for a second, alone in her car at the grocery store parking lot, or with her head bowed in the quiet of the church pew, fingers gripping the hymn book between white knuckles.
Oh, no.
Her pain threatened to spill out like water from a cracked vase, but always she tucked it safely away behind the mask. Everything changed the day Sarah appeared. Sarah Johnson had been Emily's best friend from college, a vivacious woman with wild curls and an infectious laugh. Years ago, they'd promised to remain close, but life had pulled them in different directions. Emily never expected to see Sarah in Willow Creek, yet there she was one Friday morning, knocking at the Harris front door with a bright bouquet and an even brighter smile. Emily's heart raced. She welcomed Sarah inside with practiced warmth, careful not to let her sleeves ride up or her wounds show. Over tea at the dining table, Martha dropped in pointed comments about keeping up appearances, lingering longer than usual, as though to guard Emily's secrets herself. Sarah's eyes, however, were perceptive. She noticed how Emily flinched when David barked from the other room to turn the television down, and the way Lily clung a little tighter to her mother's skirt than necessary. Sarah's visit, friendly as it was, planted a seed of worry, a subtle change in her gaze, a gentle but probing question. Are you really okay, Em? You seem tired, different. Emily, alarmed, rushed to reassure her, weaving explanations of busy schedules and a rough week at work with effortless skill. She never meant for anyone to worry, least of all Sarah. Yet after Sarah left, Emily sat at the kitchen table long after dusk, staring at her own hands and wondering if maybe, just maybe, the mask was starting to show its cracks. Late at night, with only the hum of the refrigerator for company, Emily peered at herself in the bathroom mirror. She studied her reflection, searching for the strength behind the mask. Her face looked unchanged to the world, but she could feel something shifting, a subtle exhaustion, a longing for someone to see the person beneath the surface. The mask, for now, held firm, but for the first time, Emily wondered how much longer she could keep it from breaking. The depths of fear. The days began to blur for Emily, one identical to the next. The only markers of passing time were the new bruises she tried to cover, the increasing sharpness in David's tone, and the cold calculation in Martha's glances. The house no longer felt like a home. It was a cage, its walls closing in a fraction more with every hushed argument and every hissed command. Shadows grew longer, not just those cast by the setting sun, but those cast by the secrets she carried. David's temper, always unpredictable, now swung faster toward rage. A misplaced remote sent him storming through the living room. A meal not to his liking was met with plate thrown or food dumped in the trash. Emily learned to read the warning signs: the tightening of his jaw, the narrowed eyes, the sharp exhale, and adjusted her behavior to minimize conflict. Even Lily seemed smaller these days, hugging her stuffed rabbit in corners, her laughter replaced by anxious glances toward her mother. Martha, for her part, transformed subtle cruelty into an art form. She'd humiliate Emily over minor housekeeping errors, comparing her unfavorably to David's late father's perfect wife. If Emily retreated into herself, Martha was quick to remind her that silence was weakness, and that wives in this family never complain. Emily wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her own throat. Nights were the worst. Lying in the dark, Emily's mind ran wild with worst-case scenarios. Would David snap and hurt Lily? Would Martha find the hidden bottle of concealer and demand an explanation? Would the neighbors ever believe her if she cried for help? The fear grew until it was almost physically painful, a pressure in her chest, a stone in her gut. She tried to pray, but even prayer felt hollow within those walls. Sarah's texts came like distant lifelines. "Thinking of you today," or "Let's grab coffee soon." But Emily never replied. She imagined the shame if Sarah found out everything. She pictured her mother's face if rumors started in town. She worried about losing custody of Lily, about being shunned as a troublemaker. Every possible escape route seemed blocked by a new terror. Emily's sense of self began to disintegrate. She saw herself as a shadow, moving through daily life, performing the necessary tasks, folding laundry, slicing fruit for Lily's lunch, washing the same plates over and over. She practiced smiling in mirrors, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Old hobbies, her journal, the gardening gloves tucked in the garage, went untouched. She wondered, late at night, if she'd ever find her way back to joy, or if the version of herself she remembered had already withered away. One Saturday afternoon, she caught sight of Lily coloring on the living room floor. The little girl's drawing, stick figures holding hands, was labeled "Mommy and Me." For a fleeting moment, guilt and fear were overtaken by a fierce surge of protectiveness. Emily knelt beside her, tucking a stray hair behind Lily's ear, and made a silent promise. "I will find a way out." Even as she thought it, a crash of cupboard doors startled her back to reality. David's voice thundered from the kitchen, and Emily jumped, the fragile moment lost. As dusk fell, and pain threatened to swallow her whole, one thing became clear. Surrender would be worse than whatever unknown horrors lay beyond the walls of her life. The depth of Emily's fear was real, vast, and almost paralyzing. But deep in her heart, a slow, stubborn spark refused to die. A ray of light in the darkness. A storm swept through Willow Creek one late April night, wind battering the windows, rain slashing in wild diagonals. Emily Harris breathed quietly in the darkness, curled on her side at the very edge of the mattress, the hollow of David's snoring filling the silence. Above the storm's howls, she could hear Lily's gentle breathing from across the hall. She held on to that small, innocent rhythm as she drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. It happened just after midnight. She barely recalled what started the argument. Some trivial remark about a misplaced bill, a laundry basket not emptied, or the dinner left cold when David came home late. Tension had simmered all evening until David snapped with a fury sharper and colder than before. Martha's voice, distant and disapproving, echoed from downstairs. "Keep it down. The girl is sleeping." But David didn't listen. Emily remembered falling hard against the kitchen counter, the edge bruising her arm and sending a sharp burst of white pain through her vision. When she stood, dizzy and shaken, David was already hurling accusations, words heavier and crueler than any punch. The last thing she remembered was Lily's frightened wail as she stumbled backwards, her head catching the corner of the wall before everything went black. She woke up to the harsh white light and the antiseptic smell of the hospital, a monitor beeping gently at her side. Her first thought was not for herself, but for Lily. "Where is my daughter?" Panic roared in her ears. She tried to sit up, her body protesting in deep, aching pulses. A gentle hand rested on her shoulder. A nurse, mid-40s, calm brown eyes, her hair in a messy bun, smiled with genuine warmth. "Easy now," she murmured. "You're safe. Your little girl is with the pediatric nurses, just down the hall. She's a bit shaken, but no injuries. And you? We've treated you for a mild concussion and some bruises." The nurse hesitated, studying Emily's face. "Emily, can I get you some water?" Emily nodded, silent and wary. Even here, her instinct was to make herself small, polite, invisible. Her hand shook as she took the cup. The world outside her hospital bed felt unmoored. What if David was waiting just outside? What would Martha say? Worse, what would people think if they knew the truth? The nurse took a seat beside Emily, flipping through the chart, making notes. She paused, then spoke softly. "You fell. Is that right?" "That's what they told the paramedics." Emily stared at her sheets, searching for a crack in the mask she still wore. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm clumsy." The nurse folded her hands in her lap, patient and unwavering. "Emily, I've worked in ERs for 20 years. I know what clumsy looks like. These injuries, they tell a different story. No judgment here. I just want you to know, if you need help, there are ways out." Emily's eyes blurred as she blinked back tears she'd suppressed for so long. She shook her head, but then the nurse leaned in, her tone changing. "Listen, my name's Kathy," she said, voice low and full of hard-earned certainty. "I grew up in a house like yours. I was that woman once, too." For the first time, Emily looked up. There was a quiet strength in Kathy's expression, a well of compassion laced with steel. She saw not only her own pain reflected there, but also a glimmer of something else, understanding, hope. Kathy continued, "No one deserves to live in fear, Emily. No one. I know it feels impossible, but I promise, you're not alone. If you want someone to talk to, someone outside all this, I can connect you with an advocate. No pressure. Your decision." Emily's breath trembled. The words hovered between them, fragile and powerful. "What if he finds out?" she whispered. "That's why we have safety plans." Kathy replied gently. "No one here will say a word if you don't want us to. But the first step is yours." A few hours later, after the early morning haze of painkillers had faded, and Lily was asleep in a spare cot nearby, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling tiles. Memories drifted through her mind. Laughter and dreams from years ago. Her wedding vows, spoken with trembling excitement. The crush of disappointment as each year in the Harris household had bruised her spirit further. For the first time, in the quiet cocoon of the hospital, she let herself imagine a kind of life where Lily could laugh openly again, where Emily's own voice might rise above a whisper. She remembered the way Kathy's hand had squeezed hers, the unwavering resolve in the nurse's eyes. Maybe, just maybe, escape was not a cruel fantasy. Later that morning, Emily was briefly alone, the hospital bustling outside her room. Kathy came to check in one more time before her shift ended, this time carrying a discreet packet folded into a plain envelope. "This is information for a local organization," Kathy said softly. slipping the envelope under Emily's pillow. They can help with everything: legal questions, a place to stay if you need it, advice on documenting what's happened. Even if you never use it, just know it's there for you. Emily's fingers brushed the envelope, the weight of possibility snapping something inside her. She wanted to say thank you, but words failed. So she nodded and squeezed Kathy's hand in return. Discharge was quick. David was busy at work, so Martha came to fetch her. The older woman swept into the room, all clipped concern and veiled threats. "We'll keep this quiet," she hissed under her breath, straightening Emily's collar. "You know how people talk. What would Lily's teachers think? You'll be more careful in the future, I trust." Outside, rain had faded to a gray drizzle, matching the dull ache in Emily's bones. She clutched Lily's small hand tightly, feeling the envelope under her sweater, a hidden treasure, a promise of something beyond humiliation and dread. As Martha drove them home, grumbling about hospital bills and family embarrassment, Emily stared through the window at the darkened sky and imagined, for the first time in years, that the storm might finally be passing. She spent that night moving quietly through the house, checking in on Lily as she slept, watching David and Martha as they moved in their own orbits. The house looked the same, tidy, safe, ordinary. But inside Emily, something had shifted. The nurse's words, "You're not alone," echoed louder than any threat. In the deep solitude of night, Emily sat at the kitchen table, envelope open before her, and read every word. The organization's brochures talked of safety, legal advice, acceptance, words that until now had belonged only to someone else's story. But in this small act, the simple gathering of information and hope, Emily began to reclaim her own. For the first time since she could remember, she allowed herself a single, transforming thought: silent steps. The house on Maple Street was outwardly unchanged, but for Emily Harris, every day now felt newly charged with possibility and peril. The sense of numbness that once colored her life began to dissolve, replaced by a restless tension, a coiled energy just beginning to unspool. The envelope from Kathy the nurse had become both a talisman and a weight. Emily kept it tucked inside an unused cookbook, hidden beneath recipes she knew Martha would never ask her to bake. Each morning, Emily rose early, the pink haze of dawn barely touching her windows. Old routines remained. She checked on Lily, prepared breakfast, packed lunches, and made sure every room looked impeccably presentable. But now, every step was laced with new, secret purpose. She'd read and reread every pamphlet, every hotline number, every note for creating a safety plan. She memorized the names of attorneys who offered pro bono work in local shelters open 24 hours. Even before she took action, the mere knowledge of options sparked something vital: hope. Gathering evidence, guided by advice from the materials and anonymous calls to the support organization, Emily began collecting evidence. The work was painstaking and risky. A single misstep could have devastating consequences. On her phone, she set up a hidden folder, protected by a password only she knew. There, she stored discreetly snapped photographs, the mottled bruises on her forearm after David's outburst, a shattered glass on the kitchen floor, scratch marks left on her wrist by Martha in a moment of unguarded rage. At night, after the house had stilled and David's snores rumbled through the bedroom, Emily tiptoed to the laundry room. She would record quiet, muffled snippets of David's angry tirades, holding the phone inside a pile of folded towels to mask any glow or noise. She learned to save these files to a secure cloud account, creating backups in case her device was found. Every item, every file, was named innocuously. A list of groceries here, a reminder for the PTA there. But each held a piece of her truth. Her hands trembled each time she hid another recording. But the tremor was less from fear and more from the exhilaration of finally reclaiming some control. Rebuilding trust with Lily Emily never underestimated the risk to her daughter. After that night in the hospital, Lily's eyes seemed older, watchful, tentative. It broke Emily's heart to recognize anxiety in such a young face. She knew, too, that any plan for freedom would hinge on Lily's preparedness. So, in the quiet stretches of afternoon, Emily would create little rituals for just-in-case scenarios, cloaked in the language of games. They played pretend. What would you do if there was an emergency? Emily would ask gently, her voice light, but her gaze searching. Together, they practiced memorizing Emily's cell phone number and the address of a nearby friend. Emily taught Lily how to dial 911 using a disconnected old phone. One day, Emily made Lily a small charm bracelet with a note tucked secretly inside the clasp. A list of emergency contacts. "It's for luck," she told her, fastening it around Lily's wrist. Lily smiled and spun the charms, not knowing how much might depend on it. Gaining allies, keeping secrets, Sarah remained a lifeline. Though Emily's texts to her were brief, laden with code words and polite check-ins, Sarah sensed the undercurrent. After one especially tense message, "I might need a cake recipe soon. Can I call?" Sarah drove an hour just to deliver a forgotten backpack of Lily's. In the privacy of the foyer, they managed a quick embrace. Sarah squeezed her hand and slipped a prepaid phone inside Emily's jacket pocket. "Call me anytime," Sarah whispered, looking her dead in the eyes. "Don't delay if things get bad." Beyond that, Emily learned to quietly ally herself with others. Her daughter's teacher, who noticed Lily's unusual quietness. A neighbor who'd once asked after a late-night scream. She didn't confide everything, but she let tiny hints drop.
Pick up the phone, please.
"We're all a bit tired these days," she would say with a shaky laugh. Family life, right? Beneath the surface, she knew each small connection was another thread in her safety net. Small acts of defiance. As trust in herself grew, Emily made subtle but significant changes. She no longer flinched when David demanded dinner at midnight, simply stating that the kitchen was closed. Martha's gentle barbs about dust on the piano met with a simple nod instead of hasty apologies. Emily's compliance, while outward, was now measured, controlled, her eyes less submissive, her voice just a touch steadier. There were setbacks, of course. One evening, David nearly caught her deleting a stray recording from her phone, sending Emily's heart racing in terror. She played it off as a battery problem and spent the night sick with anxiety. But she learned. She became still more careful. She asked the organization for tips on digital security, and soon her traces were almost invisible. The toll of secrecy, Emily's nerves frayed under the dual pressure of vigilance and pretense. Nights were sleepless. Her mind raced with contingency plans and escape routes. More than once, she rehearsed in her head the sequence she'd follow. Grab the go bag under her bed, wake Lily, send the coded text to Sarah, and slip out through the garage while Martha and David slept. She walked through the layout of the house, testing door hinges for squeaks and memorizing routes that offered the quickest escape. But with every passing day, the burden of secrecy was tempered by purpose.
Sorry.
She was no longer waiting for rescue. She was preparing for it. She felt the faint, visceral satisfaction after each new step. A photo discreetly uploaded, a neighbor discreetly informed, a conversation with Lily ended in a gentle hug. The faint light of freedom. By late May, the air in Texas was heavy. and sweet, perfumed by blooming magnolias. Emily watched Lily chasing fireflies in the backyard, her laughter ringing out, light and pure, for the first time in weeks. Emily sat on the porch steps, envelope still tucked safely in her pocket. The mask was still there for everyone else, but underneath, her resolve had crystallized. She wasn't out yet, not by a long shot, but she was closer. For the first time, her story was being rewritten, not as a victim swallowed by fear, but as a woman, quietly, methodically, reclaiming her future. And in every silent step, Emily felt the promise. Soon the silence would end, not in shame or secrecy, but in courage and in the open air. The cracking facade, the early summer heat settled heavy over Willow Creek, thickening with every passing day. Emily felt it pressing in, a suffocating weight layered atop her mounting fears. The cheerful decorums of the Harris home, a freshly mowed lawn, roses in bloom, the shimmering blue of the backyard pool, began to feel like props in a stage play, whose script she was rewriting beneath everyone's noses. Emily moved through each day with choreographed caution. Her routines the same on the surface, but beneath, her resolve hummed with anxious purpose. The hidden folder on her phone brimmed with evidence. The prepaid phone from Sarah was tucked in the lining of her purse. The go bag she'd assembled rested beneath a pile of outgrown coats in the garage, packed with only the essentials: clothes for Lily, documents, spare cash, the well-worn stuffed bunny. Yet as her preparations grew, so too did the risk of discovery. David's increasing suspicion. David had always been watchful, his moods unpredictable. Now, his vigilance sharpened to something almost predatory. He began to linger in doorways, his eyes following Emily a beat too long. He'd ask sudden questions. "What were you doing just now? Who were you calling?" His tone hovering between casual curiosity and accusation. If Emily's answers strayed from her usual script, she'd see a flicker of distrust cross his features. One evening, David picked up Emily's phone as she was chopping vegetables. "Why do you have 2 calculators on here?" he demanded, scrolling through her apps. Emily steeled herself, feigning a laugh. "Oh, Lily likes playing with them. It keeps her busy." Inside, her stomach flipped. Would he notice the hidden folder? Would he open the Cloud Drive app with its coded, innocuous file names? His thumb hovered, and Emily felt sweat blooming at her temples, until, at last, he dropped the device onto the counter and stormed away. That night, she sat on the floor of the bathroom, knees hugged to her chest, desperately combing through her phone's security settings, deleting and renaming with trembling hands. Her heart thundered with a sick mix of guilt and relief. It was getting harder to stay 2 steps ahead. Tightening tensions with Martha, too, seemed to sense a subtle shift. The matriarch's routines, her afternoon tea, her wordlessly critical inspections of the housework, became more intrusive. Where once she offered passive-aggressive barbs, now she pressed directly. "Your head's been in the clouds lately, Emily. Are you shirking your responsibilities? Or is something distracting you?" She insisted on helping sort laundry or organize receipts, often rattling through Emily's things with a forcefulness that bordered on invasion. Emily's hands would shake as she tried to deflect Martha's intrusions, inventing errands or playdates to shuffle her out of rooms at key moments. Sometimes, if Martha entered the kitchen suddenly, Emily caught herself shielding the pocket of her apron or slipping her phone inside a drawer. Martha's sharp gaze rarely missed these subtle tells. Worse was the new edge to Martha's threats. A good wife makes sure her husband never doubts her. David works too hard to worry about secrets in his home. The words, heavy with meaning, settled on Emily like lead. A close call. The tension came to a head one gray afternoon. Emily, nerves jangled after a difficult morning, decided to send an encrypted email with her collected evidence. Photos, audio, a scanned copy of her and Lily's birth certificates to Sarah's secure account. She double-checked the recipient's address, uploaded the files, and pressed send. Just as the progress bar completed, a floorboard in the hallway squeaked. David's silhouette filled the kitchen doorway. "What are you up to?" His face was unreadable, but his voice was ice. Emily's mind spun for an excuse. "Just emailing the PTA about the bake sale," she replied, forcing her lips into a smile. He moved swiftly, snatching the phone from her hand. She watched as he scanned through recent apps and emails. Emily's heart beat so loudly, she thought it might betray her. By some miracle, her security measures held. Nothing obvious showed. But the look he gave her, cold and narrowed, told her she'd only barely escaped disaster. For days after, David's behavior became more unpredictable. He set rigid new rules for phone use, began demanding to see Emily's texts, and installed a parental control app for Lily's safety. The air inside the house grew heavy, crackling with suspicion and the threat of coming violence. Lily's anxiety. Through it all, Lily absorbed every tremor. She'd begun having nightmares, waking up in the small hours, crying for her mother. Emily would gather her close and whisper reassurances, fighting her own tears. On one sleepless night, Lily spoke in a whisper. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" Emily smoothed her daughter's hair, promising softly, "Yes, baby, we will be. I promise you." That quiet pledge burned inside her, fueling her determination to move forward, slipping support from the outside. Emily clung to her fragile alliances, though every interaction became riskier. At church, Sarah squeezed her shoulder during the passing of the peace, her eyes questioning, offering solidarity without words. The organization's advocate began coaching Emily in safety rehearsals, by phone, always from borrowed or public devices, never inside the house. Emily learned how to spot if her car was being followed, how to erase her browser history in an instant, how to stow the portable phone inside Lily's lunchbox as a backup. Each new tip became a lifeline, every bit of knowledge hard-won and deeply necessary. Cracks in the facade. Despite her care, Emily knew the mask was slipping. She heard snatches of Martha on the phone to relatives. "There's something strange going on here." David's patience with both women thinned, arguments bursting forth in front of Lily, loud enough for neighbors to hear through the open windows. The perfect family image was fracturing, and Emily could see, in frightened glances from next door, in hushed gossip at the grocery store, that others were noticing the cracks. But the greatest change was within Emily herself. Where fear once kept her small and silent, she now felt something different pulsing inside her. Resolve, even anger. She could no longer pretend that all was well. She could not force her cheeks to smile as before, nor could she always silence the edge in her voice when Martha crossed a line. The tightrope she walked trembled, threatening to break, but for the first time, she did not shrink from the danger. One evening, as the day cooled and the summer sky darkened, Emily stood at the window, Lily quietly drawing at her feet. She caught sight of her own reflection, tired, weary, worn down, and yet, in her eyes, a clarity had bloomed. The mask that had protected her all these years was beginning to crumble, not because she was weaker now, but because she was stronger. Soon, Emily knew, the choice would no longer be hers. She would have to leap or risk everything being stripped away in the next violent storm. The silent escape. Emily Harris, watched the evening sky bruise purple over Willow Creek, thunder muttering in the distance. All day, she'd sensed the storm building. Inside the house, tension seethed, nearly visible in the thickness of the air. David's mood was a pendulum, swinging rapidly from sullen silence to sudden barking commands. Martha's surveillance grew oppressive. Her footsteps echoed in hallways, her presence a cold draft behind closed doors. But tonight, everything would change. The plan, weeks in the making, rehearsed in whispers and coded texts, would finally move from hope to action. Emily stood in the bathroom, brushing Lily's hair after bath time, meeting her daughter's eyes in the mirror. "Remember that special sleepover we talked about, sweetheart?" Emily whispered. Lily nodded, clinging to her mother's hand, trust shining through her fear. Downstairs, Martha argued over bills, David banged kitchen cabinets, and the tempest outside pressed against the glass. Emily's heart pounded with each crack of thunder. In her mind, a mental checklist ran over and over. Go bag under the coats, prepaid phone in her purse, backup flash drive with documentation. Sarah waiting on standby. The shelter advocate notified. Their code synchronized with the storm. They moved quietly after midnight. David, drowsy from too much beer, grumbled himself upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. Martha's snores drifted from the guest room, a ragged metronome marking the passing hours. Emily tiptoed down the hallway, her hand wrapped firmly around Lily's, neither daring to make a sound. The hallway lights remained off. Emily could walk the route blind by now. In the garage, Emily retrieved the go bag. Identification, cash, a change of clothes, Lily's beloved rabbit toy, and a packet of legal papers nestled among spare socks. She double-checked the prepaid phone and sent a rapid-fire text to Sarah. They eased out the side door, rain sheeting through the air. Emily pressed the remote. She'd disabled the garage alarm earlier, blaming a glitch when David had noticed the beeping code pad. She held her breath as she guided Lily into the back seat, buckled her in, and covered her with a blanket. The house loomed in the darkness, its lights winking behind curtains. One last look, the place of so much pain, but also the stage for her silent rebellion. Emily started the car and rolled down the driveway, headlights off until she reached the edge of the block. Her hands shook on the wheel. The inside of her chest felt hollow and charged. With each mile, the weight on her shoulders shifted, not gone, but transformed, bittersweet, with equal parts fear and hope. She aimed for the prearranged parking lot of an all-night Walmart. Less than a 10-minute drive. She'd mapped alternate routes and rehearsed detours in the event of a tale. Halfway there, a floodlit billboard momentarily illuminated the interior of the car. Lily's eyes were wide, but Emily squeezed her hand. "Everything's okay, baby. Just a little adventure. Just you and me," Emily whispered, voice fierce with determination. She pulled into the gravel lot, headlights flaring as Sarah's sedan emerged from the darkness, engine idling. Sarah jumped out, umbrella flapping, her face pale but resolute. She threw her arms around Emily first, then knelt to hug Lily. "We stick together. I've got you," Sarah said, voice trembling. Inside Sarah's car, Emily retrieved the packet of evidence. Photos, audio files, hospital records, sealed in a thick manila envelope. She checked the time. At 4 o'clock sharp, the advocate from the shelter would meet them, ushering them to a safe house under an assumed name. Until then, they would wait in Sarah's car, doors locked, seats sliding low. Emily texted the advocate. Arrived. Safe. Next steps? Across town, the Harris house was already stirring. Martha woke to a silent hallway. the chill of an empty kitchen. She called futilely for Emily, her irritation sharpening with every unanswered echo. Upstairs, David turned in the bed, disoriented, then suddenly alert. He checked his phone and saw missed calls and empty rooms. When he finally realized the car was gone, the kitchen light on, his rage ignited. David's first thought was not for his daughter, but for where Emily had taken his control. He began calling friends, then the police, insisting his wife had kidnapped their child, spinning stories about hysterical behavior and instability. Martha fueled his anger, offering barbed reminders that Emily could damage the family's reputation if she spoke out. The storm outside became a backdrop to their panic, a flash and crash that matched the chaos within. In Sarah's car, Emily's fear surged as her phone lit up with calls from David, voicemails piling up. She silenced it, clutching Lily to her side, focusing on the soft sound of her daughter's breathing. Sarah reached back from the front seat and patted Emily's knee. "Don't answer," she said quietly. "It's over now. You did the hardest part." At the shelter, a volunteer with kind eyes greeted them and led them inside, ushering them into a secure room, furnished simply but clean. Emily filled out forms, her hands trembling as she ticked boxes, described years of fear in a few clipped words. The advocate listened, nodding, providing reassurance and a plan. "Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we help you with police, legal support, and a permanent safety plan." Dawn brightened the gray sky as Emily and Lily curled together on the narrow cot, their first night free from David's shadow. For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to believe they might be safe. She thought of the evidence now in the shelter's possession, the copies delivered to the authorities, the advocate's calm words. "Your story will be heard." By afternoon, the police called Emily to take her statement, this time in her own words, on her own terms. She described not just bruises and broken dishes, but the crushing fear, the isolation, the dangers Lily had faced. The advocate sat beside her, offering comfort whenever her voice faltered. Meanwhile, the family's perfect mask, back in Willow Creek, continued to fracture. As word spread of Emily's escape and allegations, neighbors who'd long ignored their own suspicions began whispering. Martha bristled, defensive, while David raged, hurling accusations. But the more they attempted to control the narrative, the more it slipped away. The evidence Emily provided, painstakingly gathered and protected, became the foundation for legal action. Night arrived again, this time in the safety of the shelter room. Emily stroked Lily's hair, her heart battered but hopeful. She wasn't naive. She knew the road would be long, and fear, for now, might never fully leave her. But for the first time, Emily had stepped onto that road, away from violence, guided by her own resolve, the support of a friend, and a fragile hope that in silence, in darkness, courage could still speak loud enough to conquer fear. The mask falls. Willow Creek was a town that thrived on ritual, church bells on Sunday, PTA meetings at the school gym, block parties where children ran through sprinklers, and neighbors debated the quality of the barbecue. For years, the Harris family played their part in the small-town theater, cultivating a reputation for perfection. Now, as summer crept into June, the Whisper Network was alive with a different story. Emily Harris and her daughter had vanished into the night, and nothing would ever be the same. The first real crack in the facade came on a humid Monday morning, when police cruisers rolled up to the Harris house with their flashing lights cutting against the manicured lawns. Neighbors peeked through blinds, phones pressed to ears. Martha's composure finally faltered as officers delivered a subpoena, and David fumed, pacing in the foyer like a caged animal. His righteous anger, so effective at silencing his family, could do nothing against the calm, professional voices reading him his rights. The community watched in stunned disbelief as the truth poured out. The evidence Emily had so methodically gathered, the photos, bruises, frantic snippets of audio, Lily's own anxious drawings, painted a story too raw, too real to be denied or spun by clever words. The police investigation, guided by victim advocates, was swift but thorough. Forensic teams documented the home. Fingerprints, splinters from broken kitchenware, a patch of wall freshly painted over just a week before. Emily's physical wounds were cataloged with medical precision. In court, the mask fell completely. The legal process was grueling, but for once, the narrative was no longer controlled by David or Martha. Instead, it was shaped by evidence, by witnesses who recalled Emily's fearful glances or Lily's withdrawn silence. There was Mrs. Becker from 2 doors down, who bravely recounted hearing shouting and muted crashes at bizarre hours. There was Lily's teacher, testifying to changes in the child's artwork, once bright, suddenly overrun with angry reds and faceless figures. Emily herself took the stand, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with every answer. She told the truth, how years of fear and control had shrunk her world, how Martha's sharpened tongue was as cruel in its way as David's hands, how even the warm Texas sunshine felt oppressive under the weight of secrecy. The child advocate sat beside Lily, who clutched her rabbit toy and managed to whisper answers about scary nights and wanting Mommy to be happy again. David's defense unraveled under the weight of evidence. His denials sounded hollow, his attempts to twist the story into one of misunderstanding or mental instability found little purchase with the jury. Martha's insistence on family privacy came to sound like complicity, the facade they had maintained for so long, of upstanding citizen, loving father, faithful matriarch, crumbled in a matter of days. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere in Willow Creek shifted. Some friends turned away, but others surprised Emily with shy, apologetic casseroles or quiet offers of childcare. The local church, once a well of gossip, now organized a fundraiser for survivors. For the first time, the town began to confront the fact that darkness could exist behind even the most beautiful shutters. The court awarded Emily full custody of Lily and imposed a restraining order against David. Martha, no longer welcome in the community she once ruled, moved to a distant relative's home. Her visits to the courtroom became rare, her gaze hardening with each appearance until she finally stopped coming altogether. In the end, David accepted a plea deal, guilty on multiple counts of domestic abuse, coercive control, and child endangerment. The judge's words were clear and final. This was not only a crime against your wife and daughter, but against the very trust of this community. Emily's world changed again in ways both sweeping and minute. She and Lily moved into a small rental on the outskirts of town, shaded by live oaks and thick with the hum of cicadas. The house was modest, but it was hers, and the silence inside was gentle now. Not the hush of fear, but the quiet of safety. Lily pinned her first drawing to the refrigerator without asking permission. Emily sipped coffee on the porch, feeling the strangeness of freedom stretch into each sunrise. Mornings began slow and sweet, with no rush to anticipate David's moods or Martha's critiques. Healing was not a straight path. There were still bad dreams. Lily sometimes woke crying out, and Emily's hands would shake when the phone rang unexpectedly. Therapy sessions brought tears, but also cautious laughter. On weekends, Sarah would bring takeout and they'd sit outside, talking late into the evening. Some days, Emily simply sat and listened to Lily tell stories, amazed at the strength in her daughter's smile. With help from the advocacy group, Emily began taking classes online, courses in child development, counseling, subjects she'd once abandoned for the responsibilities of the Harris household. She found joy in the garden out back, coaxing life from tired soil, letting Lily help dig and plant. She started to dream of vacations, of a future where Lily could take dance classes, of someday speaking publicly about her journey so that others might feel less alone. The town, too, was changed by the events of the summer. There were uncomfortable conversations at church, at City Hall, in quietly urgent parent meetings. But there was also a growing sense that truth, once spoken, could not be ignored. Posters about domestic violence shelters appeared on notice boards. The PTA invited a speaker from the Advocacy Center. Neighbors began checking in on each other in more meaningful ways. The old culture of secrecy losing ground to a fragile but genuine accountability. On the anniversary of their new life, 1 year since the escape, Emily hosted a small gathering in her yard. Sarah brought cake, Lily helped string paper lanterns, and Emily's few closest friends toasted to her courage. When dusk settled over the grass, she stood on the porch and thanked everyone, her voice steady and sure. "I won't need to hide anymore," Emily said, her heart thumping with gratitude and hope. "For so long, I thought my silence was safety. Now I see my story, our story, could be someone else's ray of light." As the evening breeze swept through the open door, carrying laughter into every room, Emily felt the last fragments of the old mask fall away. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a mother, a friend, and finally, the author of her own life. And as the lanterns glowed softly under a starry Texas sky, both she and Lily felt, for the first time in memory, what it truly meant to be free.